And by doing this, you can mark each part of the song. This makes it easier to construct your songs, and it also means you can jump through parts of the song and get to parts you want to fix or work on quicker without having to dig for them. So now that we've got the intro, we'll just call this the verse. Move that over. And then this part would be the breakdown / build up. I'll just call it breakdown. Before I elaborate more on the breakdown, I'd like to discuss this one part of the verse. As you can hear, we took a dubstep growl that we'll later be using in the drop, and we transposed it into the verse to add a segue into the breakdown. Just like we did with the fills, this is something I really recommend for getting rid of that dead space without having the song sound obnoxious with playing the same synths over and over again, and it also works really well for transitioning to different parts of the song. Now we have the breakdown, and as you can see here, we're playing the same melody that we were playing through the verse, but this time we've looped it to not play the whole melody, and we actually did that in the intro as well. And one thing that we dropped in the breakdown that we had in the verse was this little saw bass, as I've called it. This is a very interesting sound that sort of fills up a little bit of gap with the mid bass, because the sub bass that we'll get to later is taking care of all of the low bass, and of course we have the frequencies taken up by the typical Skrillex sounding basses in the drop, but in the verses it could be kind of bland to not have any real mid bass going on. So to remedy that, I took a saw wave, an analog, and I detuned it and played it at a low octave. And then I went into EQ8 and I removed some of the lower end bass that the sub would be taking care of. And then I removed a lot of the high frequencies. And then we have this kind of mid-range bass. This might be a little bit hard to hear if you're watching this on laptop speakers, so you might want to get a good pair of headphones or some good studio monitors. Now usually when I'm making synths for a song of this nature, I would take multiple synths which might have kind of a similar sound, and some of them that might be completely different, and then layer each other, some of them more quiet and some of them louder. But seeing how this is just an example track, and seeing how some people out there might not have the best CPUs, we left it simple by having a super saw that I made in Serum. Very basic trance-like sound. And an operator, I took a sine wave, played it at a high octave, and I turned off the sustain and gave it a short decay, and I made these little sine wave bell sounds. You can see I also put on some reverb and some EQ8 to get rid of the low frequencies. Now another synth that I put in this song, and this is a very minor but important part of music that a lot of people overlook, is having very quiet synth arpeggios in the background. In analog, I made another super saw type sound and gave it a short decay, and I played it at a very high octave, and I have this in playing this very short arpeggiated melody throughout most of the song. We'll solo that so we can hear it. It's very quiet and very subtle, but it's also extremely important, because again, it's adding more layers to the song, keeping things interesting, and it's keeping some more melody in the song. So when the drop hits, there's not just chaotic bass going on. There's still a little bit of melody there to give the listeners some comfort. And if you're wondering why we have some blank MIDI tracks floating around, we'll explain that much later. Now let's focus a little bit more on the breakdown and build-up. Now breakdowns are pretty self-explanatory. Parts of the song get stripped away, and then they fade back in, or new ones come in, and they build more anticipation for whatever will come next. In our case, it's the drop.